Man, that was wild.
The range of emotions that we all went through as Sixers fans last night was tough. It really was. So we're going to break it all down. What we saw last night in South Philly as the Sixers beat the Memphis Grizzlies, trending in the AM. It starts in 30 seconds.
Holding, gets around in front. Embiid, and Philadelphia has it.
And a very good morning, everybody, and welcome to Trending in the AM right here on DSM Media. We're live, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube. You know the drill. Like, share, retweet, follow on all social media platforms. Do us that favor. Head over to the DSM Media YouTube page. Hit that subscribe button. Turn notifications on. Like this video. It's the best place to get interactive with the show. Drop your comments, thoughts, questions. As we break down last night's, I don't know how the word to describe last night's Sixers game, but we are going to try to find a way to break it down, talk about it. Like I said in the intro, the range of emotions that we all went through last night as we watched that game. I'm your host, Phil Stifel. Bearded Knowledge on Twitter. We got Dylan Davis, Dylan JD98. We got Scotty Drown down there. The DSM NBA gurus. I don't know if you could say gurus per se. Hey, hold on. You're not including me in that guru mark? Come on, man. That's a little disrespectful right there if I don't say so. Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you both waking up this morning to join me as we talk about the range of emotions we went through last night in the first game back from the All-Star break. Dylan, how were your emotions feeling last night?
They were crazy, man. It was playoff basketball. It's exactly what Tobias Harris said after the game. It's exactly what the arena felt like, especially in the final 3 to 5 minutes or so of that game. But I'm happy to be back with you. Push off my morning jog for you, and here we are. You know,
I know that morning jog is really, really a big part of your day. Yeah. So I appreciate you delaying that to come live this Friday morning.
No
here.
problem,
Scotty. I know you're not a morning jogger, so that wasn't the problem waking you up this morning. How are your emotions feeling this morning? I think Dylan said it best. That was like a playoff atmosphere down in South Philly last night.
Yeah, I was up until probably like 2 a.m. I had to like take my energy to another level and go play FIFA afterwards because I just couldn't stop the competition. Like I wanted to keep winning, so I had to keep going. It was a great game last night. One thing about the Grizzlies, I'll say off top, is like they're such an annoying team to play, and I get why. We just don't play them that often to build that disdain, because if we did, it would be there. But those guys, I will say I respect them at the same time because they're not afraid to poke the bear. They're going to get the best shot out of every single team that they play because of the way that they act and the way that they play. And they're not afraid of that. And I got to give kudos to them because it makes the game competitive. And that's what we saw last night, which is what I loved. You just don't get that.
My man Hunter checking and saying they think they're the bad boys of the NBA.
They really do.
I think that's a very fair assessment there on who they think they are.
Keyword think.
Yeah, think. So last night, obviously, Sixers win. Let me recap this here. 110-105. Right before the game dropped. I don't even know if the news dropped before you guys did pregame live last night. Obviously, Joel Embiid was not, 100% going into the game last night. And I think, before we get into the end of the game where the Sixers finally made their comeback, last night's game kind of just reiterated one of the big question marks about this team, and that's the backup center depth. You had a guy in Joel Embiid who was obviously sick as can be last night, again, for the 1,000th time sick. And, he was struggling, obviously, mightily in the first half. Played 20 of 24 first half minutes. I think it was 2 of 14 in the first half. Could not get anything going. You could just tell his energy level was not there. But they had no choice but to play him. I think Paul Reed played 4 minutes in the first half, and that was it. And that just kind of proves the fact that we've got 25 games, starting last night, 25 games in 45 days. A really tough stretch of games, a lot of games in a short amount of time. Joel Embiid is going to need rest. Last night obviously could have been one of those nights, or at least to, hold back his minutes a little bit last night, and they couldn't do it because of the fact that they don't have any other options there. So we'll start with you, Scotty. Before we get into the game itself, is last night another example of why we've got an issue here at the backup center position?
It is and it isn't. So it is because it's the biggest question mark that we had going into the All-Star break. Like when you look around the team, the depth in the team. Me and Dylan talked about this the other day on Sixers pregame. That's the one hole in the team that you can clearly see, right? We have no idea if it's Paul Reed, Trez. Sounds like Trez is out of the rotation now, but we don't know if it's going to be Paul Reed, Dedmon, or PJ Tucker that's playing that backup five. But on the other side of things, it's like once you get to the playoffs, Embiid's probably going to have to play 40 minutes a game anyways. Like we can't afford to put like a Dedmon in the game, but maybe that speaks to your point even more. But we've seen how they rotate the guys in the playoffs. Once we get there, Embiid's not going to come out. That's why it's so crucial that we don't run him into the ground during this final stretch.
Yeah.
So it is important. It is a hole that we are missing, and it's very clear. But the main thing is keeping Embiid healthy into the playoffs because he will ultimately need to play those minutes. But I do agree with you. It was clear as day.
You mentioned Montrezl Harrell's name there, and he's obviously fallen out of the rotation.
Yeah.
But my question is, like, was he really that bad when he was out there? Like, he didn't play great. He wasn't the best backup center we ever had for Joel, but he had a couple games where he didn't perform badly. He put up some minutes. He grabbed a few rebounds a few times. Dylan, I see you shaking your head. Was he really that bad to completely pull him out of the rotation when you have no other options right now?
It's so tough because I'm trying to take like my feelings out of it because I was happy about the Trez signing in the offseason.
Right.
Like I thought he was going to be a spark plug off the bench. He's a bucket getter off the bench, former 6th man of the year, like 2 short years ago. He wasn't that bad to your point, but there were many times, specifically on the defensive end, where dude, Joel comes out and they have an 8-point lead, and it's reminiscent of 2018, 2019 with Greg Monroe and Boban, where they're a negative 11 in 2 minutes somehow. That's how bad it got at times. I brought this up to Scotty last night. Like, I don't know if you saw the interview with Daryl Morey on somebody's podcast the other day, but I
accidentally mentioned the name of the podcast on this show yesterday, and I kicked myself in the ass for mentioning that name on this show.
He left out Montrezl Harrell's name when discussing the backup five, and I thought, I don't think that was by accident. No. So there's probably discussion going on internally between him, the head coach, and all that. So yeah, it probably is the end of Montrezl Harrell unless something drastically wrong happens with Paul Reed.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that, Scotty?
Yeah, I do agree with it. And I think with Montrezl Harrell, it looked good when he gets those massive minutes when Embiid's actually out. I think whenever he's out, Montrezl Harrell isn't a bad option to throw into the starting lineup. Just because I think with more minutes, Montrezl gets a little bit better rhythm. He gets into those pick and rolls with Harden and the other guards. So that's where he's comfortable. But I think in a minimal role, he just doesn't have the time that he can figure out what he's out there to do in that moment. And I think it's something that Paul Reed goes through too as a younger player. It just looks a little bit different. But what I would say between the two of them is you got to put the guy on the floor that's going to give you the best chance on defense. And I think that's the biggest thing. When Embiid goes out, we saw the shot blocking ability, the defensive anchorness of Joel Embiid last night and what he was doing and why he's so important, even on the defensive end. He was gobbling up the boards last night. That is one thing that I'll give Embiid credit for last night. He tried to make his efforts in other ways because the ball just wasn't going through the net. But yeah, I think when you look at it from that perspective, it's got to be Paul Reed right now because he is more defensively sound. He gives you more energy, honestly.
It is funny though, real quick. We mentioned playoff atmosphere earlier, and Scotty mentioned the rotation come playoff time. It's essentially what you got last night in playoff atmosphere. Embiid played 38 minutes. Backup center played 6. You moved PJ to the small ball 5 for a little bit. You essentially got probably what you're going to see in the postseason in that kind of game.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I mean, I think to what Scotty said last night, we'll get into the game more specifically now. You look at old Joel Embiid, years past, when he's sick, he's banged up, mentally not engaged in the game for whatever reason, it affects him on the defensive side. Last night, I mean, he had 27 points, but he had 19 boards and 6 block shots last night, along with the 6 assists. I mean, that is not 2 years ago. Joel Embiid's not doing that 2 years ago. He's seen himself. He shot 2 of 14 in the first half, ended up, making a couple good, not good, great buckets, big buckets down the stretch. But old Joel Embiid lets the struggles on offense dictate and affect him on defense. And he didn't do that. And that to me showed a lot of maturity from Joel Embiid because, I mean, there's not one person, whether you're a diehard like us or a casual watching the game last night, that couldn't tell that he was not, healthy enough to be playing in that game last night. And he barreled down and took care of it. And I was joking with Dylan before we went live that, I had a few cocktails last night for my wife's birthday. So whenever I have a few cocktails, I have to go back and check what I say on Twitter because I never know what's going to come out when I'm on Twitter after a few martinis. And I tweeted out at halftime about Charles Barkley calling out, Joel Embiid's mental toughness. And then you watch that second half and you're like, hold on. There's no questioning Joel Embiid's mental toughness after what you saw him put forward in that second half. So, I mean, to that point, Scotty, this is definitely a different Joel Embiid, what we saw last night.
Yeah, and I'm glad you guys brought that point up because when you look at this game, I think back to a moment specifically, and there was quite a few moments in this game where it could have turned south. When he got blocked straight up by Jaren Jackson Jr. And it was kind of embarrassing, right? It's on your home court. He's trying to go in and stuff. He's having a rough night. And then he just gets totally, stuffed at the rim, right?
It was as clean as could be, too.
It was as clean as could be. And you could tell once again, Embiid just doesn't have the energy, right? And maybe he would have blocked him anyways because Jaren Jackson Jr. is a good blocker. But that was like a turning point in the game where I felt like Embiid could really get out of control and kind of lose himself, right? That's where what we talk about all the time, Dylan, when Embiid messes up somehow on a play, then he comes right back down, runs it down the court, and gets an
offensive foul. Yeah.
He did not do that. He didn't lose his place. He didn't, just start turning the ball over, doing a bunch of crazy stuff. So I do agree. I thought he kept his composure last night. That's a really rough shooting night for Joel Embiid. He has not shot like that, and I don't know how long. He's been very efficient this year. So for him to kind of be able to turn that into something else, be able to get to the free throw line 17 times, to be able to get your teams and your teammates involved with the 6 assists, defensive anchor with the 6 blocks, like you mentioned, it's interesting to see how maybe that comes from James Harden a little bit, right? Maybe you can learn that from James Harden, a guy that has learned how to fill up the box sheet without worrying about scoring all the time, right? And I think that's what we're seeing Embiid kind of turn into here. He can pass the ball when he needs to. You saw him get double teamed last night. And mind you, the Grizzlies played their pick and roll probably the best I've seen anybody play it all season. And that's just the tenacity that the Grizzlies play with. But I think it shows the Sixers something that they're going to see in the playoffs with how they were playing that pick and roll and how guys were just dropping into Embiid every time on that mid-range jump shot and saying, James, go ahead. If you want to do a couple dribbles and do a step back 3 on our center, you can do that. We're going to go ahead and lock Embiid down and get a hand in his face. So it was interesting to see them adjust to that. And I think, once again, that speaks to Embiid's level of IQ on the basketball court, his mental toughness that as you guys mentioned, we've gone through the hula hoops with Embiid and mental toughness and the way he reacts to certain things on the court. And I thought last night was a great sign towards the playoffs. And that goes for the whole team. We talked a little bit about it in the DSM chat last night. Mental toughness is going to be so huge for this team. And it's what Charles Barkley called him out for, like you said, Phil. So,
right. I mean, Charles Barkley called him out for being mental tough. And they were saying on that halftime show, well, if he's so sick, then he shouldn't be playing. And, obviously he wasn't watching the TNT halftime show at half. But,
right.
I'm sure he was getting some fluids and some IV treatment there in the back. But it's kind of like he did hear what was being said and he knew. And we've talked about this all year long, that there's just a different look in Joel Embiid's eyes. Yeah. That he's less distracted by the outside noise and more focused on that, get past the second round, get into a title, whatever it may be. And I think last night, playoff atmosphere aside, I think just the big game atmosphere and feel of last night proved that he wasn't going to do it. And he had an awful shooting night, obviously. Yeah. But he didn't let it stop him because, he was 2 of 14, but he went 5 of 11 in the second half and started getting to the free throw line. So he was able to keep going and keep pushing through and find that next level. And that's what superstars do. They find that next level, that next gear that helps elevate a team. Sorry, Dylan,
And I
go
think
ahead.
that speaks to his mental toughness as well to play through the illness in itself. Like that's something that he doesn't have to do. He could have took a load management night out of the All-Star break and not played. Like he didn't have to do that. There's
Well, he
something
also
in his head that says, I got to play. I need to play through all of this.
He also has the worst immune system I've ever seen a professional athlete have. So he's probably learning to play through certain illnesses when he can't play through others. I don't know, but listen, I'm grateful to Charles Barkley for us having this small segment on the show today and giving us something extra to talk about outside the game. But I've learned to block that crew out a long time ago. They're three of the best to ever do it. They're funny. Sometimes they're insightful. But when it comes to Joel Embiid and Joel Embiid specifically, like what the hell? Like if he's that sick, why is he playing? These are the same dudes that would sit there if he had a broken foot and say, back in my day, I played through injuries no matter what. I gave my team 110%. Now he's not supposed to play if he's feeling under the weather, if he's that sick. How do you jump to the conclusion at halftime because he's having a poor shooting night that he's not mentally tough or question his mental toughness? How do you after the game, if they lose by 15 and he looks sluggish, go ahead and rip him and talk about it. How do you jump to that conclusion at halftime?
I mean, I just want to know what was going around Salt Lake City because Shaq missed, yesterday. Joel Embiid sick. I'm sure a couple other NBA players are probably sick. What was going on in the water or food of Salt Lake City that caused everybody to get sick, at All-Star break weekend? Because
I mean, apparently there's nothing to do down there. I think it was Shaq that said it All-Star weekend, right? Like these people are or Charles Barkley said it actually. That these people are all going to heaven because there ain't nothing to do in Salt Lake City.
that is why I do love the TNT crew for
no, they're funny as hell.
They
are funny, man.
When it comes to Joel specifically, they're a mess, man. If he gives you 28 in the first half, they critique how he's not on the block enough. If he struggles shooting, they critique his want to and his ability to dominate. If he's sick, they critique his mental toughness. So I don't know. It doesn't make any sense.
So I want to get into one thing here. I remember I was going through my tweets and I tweeted it out last night and it was about Doc Rivers. And last night the Sixers, their last lead was 7-6 before they took the lead in the last minute of the game. They held the lead in last night's game for less than 1 minute of game action. And that's to be able to come out and win that game. It's great. But I've been starting to think about it, and you guys know, I've been extremely critical of Doc Rivers, not just this year, but for years now. Since the day he was brought to Philly, I have been critical of Doc Rivers. But it's something that's starting to go through my mind that Doc Rivers is actually having his best season as a Sixers coach this year in coaching this team. And I think keeping that team together, the way he handled the rotation, the way he handled letting Joel Embiid fight through the issues that he had last night. D'Anthony Melton obviously is banged up and struggling, curtailing his minutes a little bit, not using Paul Reed too much, having PJ Tucker. Doc Rivers coached a pretty damn good game last night. And I think it's about time we start, I don't want to say, accepting Doc Rivers as being a great coach, but maybe back off the Doc Rivers hate a little bit, back off the Doc Rivers, critiquing a little bit. And come playoff time, we'll have to see. But at this point, Dylan, you're shaking your head. Do you agree that Doc Rivers is having a damn good season as a coach this year?
I mean, I felt like I've been saying this
better than he has been.
Yeah, I feel like I've been saying this to Scotty since January, since December, and I 110% get this comment. I'm the same way. Like nothing really matters until the postseason, until we see something different. However, you have to be able to play both sides of the fence. You have to be able to give some sort of credit to the head coach when things are going well. It's not always the players when things are going well, and when things go bad, it's Doc Rivers. So they have the fourth best record, third best record in the NBA. They're the 3 seed in the East. They're on pace for like 54, 53 wins. You have to give them credit. You just it's undeniable at this point. If you want to sit here and say, I'll give them credit, but I'm not sold on him as the future of this future head coach of this team until I see something different in the playoffs. Well, 110%, I agree with you. If they're a second round exit again, he's most likely gone. But for the time being, you have to wipe your hands clean of all your past Doc hate and say, you know what? He's doing a hell of a job this year. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, that's fair. But here's the thing, and Scotty, I'll turn this over to you, this Doc Rivers talk. Last night's game, I think you said it at the beginning of the show there, it was a playoff atmosphere in South Philly last night. But not just the atmosphere, that game against the Grizzlies, that style of game, if we face the Celtics in the playoffs, that's the kind of game that we're going to have to play in a 7-game series. And in years past, the regular season game, not just the playoffs, the Sixers lose last year, with last year's mentality. Doc Rivers, I mean, so you can almost take last night's win as maybe a glimpse of what it might be like when we have to face the Celtics or the Bucks in a 7-game series in the conference finals or whenever it may be, right?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think when you're looking at this game, it's actually great this game happened right after the All-Star break when all this talk about the Sixers has been kind of arising, right, in Philadelphia. We've had the time to get over the Super Bowl loss. We're moving on to the Sixers.
That window, Scotty.
Here. Yeah, exactly. The window's open.
Baseball hasn't started yet. The union haven't started. Nothing started yet.
So it's great this game happened because I get both sides of Joe's comment there. Do it in the playoffs, and then I'll be convinced. Like, yes, there's been so many signals that this could be the same Sixers team that we've seen the last few years, right? There's been a couple different signs there. The backup center position that's still missing, for instance. But there's also the signs that things do look different. Like, it is a different season. Every season's different. It's a new season. And this is ultimately a different team. And I think last night was the epitome of that because that is absolutely 150% a loss. In last season, the season before that, that is a loss because Memphis, they play a certain type of ball and it's very gritty. They go after it. They're scrappy. And that is what impressed me the most about the Sixers last night. The fact that Joel Embiid didn't shoot the ball well, right? James Harden stepped up. He hit some big-time shots. But overall, they were scrappy as a team. And we talked about this last night in the pregame show as well. I'll get back to the Doc Rivers point. But the last night, PJ Tucker, man, I mean, he just makes these plays that, like, you're never going to see it in the stat sheet. I mean, last night you could see the 2 for 3 from the three-point line. But it's not just that. It's the timing of the shots. It's the timing of the rebounds. It's the timing of the strips. The timing 11. Of getting a hand in Ja Morant's face or somebody that he shouldn't even be able to guard and just making that play in that moment. And I think that's the difference between the Sixers right now and in this season is just that scrappiness, that competitiveness, because they could have laid down and died last night. They could have laid down and died last night. We could be talking about how disappointing of a loss it was and how this is the same old Sixers team coming out of the break. They're not showing passion. It didn't look like they wanted it. But instead, they woke up, they came out, and they won the game. And that gives me good signs, honestly. That gives me good signs. It could have turned south. Obviously, it was still a close game, but that's a really, really good team in the Memphis Grizzlies.
Absolutely.
As far as Doc Rivers, I think you're spot on. I think we got to give him a little bit of credit here. You talk about this season, we've had all 3 of our main stars out at one point, and at one point they were out at the same time. And he was able to weather through that storm. We saw some good time from Shake Milton and DeAnthony Melton. Saw some good minutes from Montrezl Harrell. So he's pressing the buttons at the right time. I think he's looked great. And one last thing about Doc is, last night in that game, let's give him some credit for that challenge on the Tobias charge, right? That was overturned into a blocking call. Yep. You get Tobias to go to the line, and I believe it was like a 2-3-point game at that time. So that was kind of gravity shifting in that moment to even go out and challenge that call. And that's something that he's been criticized before, not challenging certain plays. Mm-hmm. Mind you, it's the guy behind the bench that's keeping an eye on that stuff. So it really shouldn't have an effect on Doc. But give him the credit because you wouldn't give it to him if he didn't call that challenge, right?
I think last night is the epitome of why people need to ease off a little bit from the other perspective. What is the main critique people give Doc Rivers here in Philadelphia? Blowing big leads, right? Blowing big leads in the second half. How much was Memphis up by last night?
12 points. 12 at half. I think it was
17 at 1 point.
17 at 1 point. Okay. So newsflash, people. I know maybe you don't watch across the NBA a lot. Teams blow double-digit leads quite often in this league. Like, I get it.
Are they calling for Memphis head coach?
Right. Like when I get it. It is ugly to watch as a fan. When they blow an 18-point lead somehow, it looks really bad. It happens all the time across the league. So that's the funny part. B, PJ Tucker was a plus 11 last night, Scotty. Second on the team. 2 for 3. It's exactly what we discussed. He plays elevated to the competition, something you're going to need in the playoffs. Last thing before I throw it back to you, Phil, they played to go off Scotty's point. They played like a team who knew the moment. They played like a team that knew their opportunity here in front of this home crowd, and they fed off of it. And that's what was exciting to me. They did not lie down and die last night. And even forget the 17-point lead. The whole third and fourth quarter, it was 7, it was 9, it was 8. They just couldn't crack that code. And then just like that, James Harden bangs a 3. Tobias Harris bangs a 3. Joel Embiid gets a block. And here we are.
And I think it's amazing because the Grizzlies, like I said earlier, they poked the bear last night, and they did it several times. Dylan Brooks, obviously, he was a team low minus 13 for the Grizzlies last night.
That's funny, isn't it?
I think it's because of what he does, though. He awoke James Harden last night. James Harden played out of his mind, and I think that's not all on Dylan Brooks. Obviously, I don't want to give him too much credit, but they poked the bear. Jaren Jackson Jr.
Can I ask you guys a question?
We're talking the first 25 minutes here of this show mostly about Joel Embiid, but really everybody's forgetting James Harden.
Oh, and MVP of the game last night.
That was an MVP level performance.
Oh
yeah, absolutely.
Go under the radar because of Joel Embiid this year, and I think that's enough. We talk about Joel Embiid's maturity. James Harden wants to be in the limelight 2 years ago. Now he's okay. He dominated, carried that team last night. If James Harden doesn't have that game, I don't care about all the other things. We don't win that game. If he doesn't make the 3 shot you're talking about, Dylan, we do not win that game. But it's going to go forgotten because Joel Embiid fought through the sickness, fought through the 2 for 14 first half. That's what people are going to talk about. And I think that shows a lot of maturity from James Harden as well, that he's okay taking that secondary seat this year.
Yeah. No, and the one thing that I've loved about James's game offensively this year that he's kind of changed, like you saw at the end of last year and even the beginning of this year, he falls in love with the 3 ball sometimes late in games, right? When it's really not there and he tries to hit a big step back 3. Last night and for the last couple months, you've seen him late game when they only need a bucket or 2. He knows when to step back and he knows when to get to the rim and draw contact or finish. So that's been awesome. Can I ask you guys a question? Just Scotty mentioned poking the bear. We don't want to see suspensions or anything, so you don't want to see any actual fights on the court. How badly do you want to see George Niang actually get into a fight on the floor? Like, he is the funniest. Like, he antagonized that whole thing last night, but I loved every second. I don't know. Did you guys read his lips when he took the ball from Jaren Jackson? Bro, go back and watch it. Jaren Jackson starts jawing at him, and he goes, "What the fuck are you going to do?" Like 3 times. Just keep saying it, dude. I just want to see him get in a fight so bad.
Let it happen now, not in the playoffs. That's all I can say.
Oh, yeah.
We don't want the suspension in the playoffs and all. All right, so, I want to get back to Harden and Tobias, some of these other players in a second, but something that's been, really eating at me from last night's game in a good way, not in a bad way, is we keep talking about the turnaround from the first half to the second half. It's the defense. And Doc Rivers, the defense, PJ Tucker. You have John Morant, who is one of the best players in the NBA. He was, 3 of 16 last night? Yep. You have Desmond Bane, who I forget the exact number. What do you have, 19 or 20 points in the first half? They held him to 5 points in the second half. Yep. And that right there, being able to control, maintain, keep. John Morant's going to get his shots off. But where Joel Embiid had a bad first half and turned it around in the second half, the Sixers were able to maintain that defensive presence and control John Morant in the second half. And then whatever they were doing wrong on Desmond Bane in the first half, they were able to find an adjustment. We always talk about in all our sports with the Eagles, the Sixers, everybody, coaches making adjustments. They were able to find a way to not let Desmond Bane go from 19 in the first half to 40 by the end of the game and lock him down. So again, this is back to Doc Rivers. This is back to the PJ Tucker and the defense. It's just different this year with this team. And I think the way they were able to play defense on those 2 guys specifically, whole game, second half more specifically, really shows also another level of maturity with this team.
I would say even after the first quarter, I think the Sixers' sluggish offense overshadowed how great the defense was. So Memphis went off in the first quarter, almost scored 40, right? After that, they scored 22, 22, and 24 by quarter. That's spectacular, especially against the second seed out west. So, yeah, I think if Joel Embiid wasn't shooting so poorly, if the offense wasn't so bad in the first half, you're probably looking at that game, and the Sixers are probably up by 8 or 9 most game in that normal situation. So the defense was spectacular last night.
To give Doc a little bit more credit, there was a point in the TNT coverage where they showed the huddle, and it was after Desmond Bane. I think he went 4 for 5 from 3 in the first quarter or something. He hit his first 4 threes.
Yeah.
And you hear Doc Rivers in the huddle, and he's just looking at the guys. He's like, "So we're just gonna let their best shooter open 4 times in a row. Like we're just gonna let him open. We're gonna walk away from him. How many times are we gonna walk away from their best shooter and let him open it for an open 3?" And from there on out, they turned it on. They were paying attention to Desmond Bane. So I think once again, it's just those little things with Doc Rivers, and maybe he's changed that this year. We don't know. We don't know if he's changed those little things that he's saying to them or whatnot. But that was another good coaching point. It's very simple, but it is something you have to say sometimes to wake your guys up.
Right,
you look at Desmond Bane, 4 for 12 from the three-point line to end the night. So after those 4 threes in the first quarter, he didn't hit another one. So they got him out of rhythm, and I think that's a huge thing there.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you say that, and I didn't see that timeout huddle there. That's probably right when I was just getting into the game last night.
Yeah.
But, in years past, when there was a timeout in a tough game like last night, when things weren't going well, and you see Doc Rivers try to huddle up the team, the whole team doesn't even, in years past, get together. Half the team doesn't even look like they're listening or paying attention. Based off of what you're saying, and I didn't see it, I'm just going off of what you said.
Yeah.
It sounds like they're all listening, and they're all buying into what Doc's saying. So something has clicked differently, not just with Doc Rivers, with the whole team. There's a different philosophy, energy, feeling, and that kind of describes that last night where they're listening to what he has to say finally.
Yeah. I would also add in, it's just kind of us as fans. Like, I feel like without that clip, Scotty, there's probably certain fans out there blaming that start on Doc, right? Like, what are they running defensively? Why is he not adjusting? And you hear that clip and you're like, he's freaking out just as much because it's not always on him.
Yeah.
The players start out sluggish. Clearly, that wasn't by design to leave Desmond Bane wide open. So he gives them that little kick in the ass with sarcasm, and they lock back in. So, I think that was important last night.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so back to the rest of this team. So we talked yesterday. I had Sean Bernard, Philadelphia Sports Network, Pick Swap Pod on, and we were talking about it's got to be other guys that step up, especially in this next 25-game stretch, 24 games now after last night. And, I remember it was like some point in the third quarter, early fourth. And like you said, Dylan, we kept trying. We get to 7 points and they'd go and stretch it back to 12, 5 points. And I know one point we got to 5 and then they stretched it back to 10 again. And I'm looking at the box scores at that point, the game. And I'm like, it's Joel Embiid and it's James Harden and nobody else is really stepping up. Tyrese Maxey was having another off shooting night. But then all of a sudden, bam, Tobias Harris goes from 8 points to 20 points like that, turns on his game. And I said it on Twitter, and I said it in yesterday's show, that out of anybody not named James Harden and Joel Embiid, that it's Tobias Harris that has to step up the biggest in this stretch run for this Sixers team. And first half of that game, first 3 quarters of that game, I'm like, damn, this is not the night where he gets back rolling, and then boom, he starts doing it. Do you guys agree that Tobias Harris, was crucial to the comeback? We already said that last night, but also he needs to use that game last night to carry over Saturday night and going forward, because Tobias Harris is so integral if he is on point to this team's success.
I mean, I would argue, Scotty, that Tobias Harris is the antithesis of what we praised PJ Tucker for in the past. Tobias Harris has his moments. He has his 22-point games, 8 rebound games against the New York Knicks and the Orlando Magic and blah, blah, blah. Against the Celtics, against the Bucks. There's somewhat of a disappearing act from this dude, or he gets locked down defensively. Listen, James and Joel are the best duo in the league right now, and that 2-man game's at the highest level. There's a lot of great duos and trios in this league and in the Eastern Conference. Tobias Harris does have to be a guy, an X factor of sorts, an other of sorts, that needs to step up, specifically when you're talking against this stretch and in the postseason, because James and Joel can give you they could combine for 65. Mm-hmm. Where's the rest coming from? Are you relying on 22-year-old, 21-year-old Tyrese Maxey to average 20 plus? Or are you relying on maybe Maxey giving you 16, Tobias giving you 15? So, yeah, Tobias Harris definitely is critical going forward, because there's going to be a lot of games where Joel and James are battling with someone else's top 2, and who the hell is going to be that difference maker? Last night, it was him.
But it also comes down to, and I'll let you in here in a second, Scotty. It's not just the games when James and Joel are battling, with other people.
Yeah.
You got 24 more games in 44 days.
Right, where they missed.
There's going to be a lot of games where James or Joel need a day off. I know they talked about it on the show the telecast last night too. The word load management is getting a lot of negative connotation, but in this day and age, it's just the way the league's going. Tobias is not going to get the load management that Joel gets. When Joel has a day off, somebody's got to pick up the offensive scoring. So a game like that last night, building Tobias's confidence in that second half could help and could translate to those other games where he needs to take an offensive focus of this team.
Yeah, no, I think you make a great point about the load management there, and there's actually a great segment by JJ Redick out there as to why load management is so popular in this day and age.
I want to ask you guys a question about that too in a minute.
I don't know. There's two sides to that. One side, it's a money thing with fans and fans needing to see the players they want to see, but the other side, it's just keeping your guys healthy, and that's where I come in. And I'm like, load management for Embiid is
me too, bro. Like, I'm so on board of get me a fresh Joel in the postseason. Like, I do feel bad for like the family that can only go to one game and they don't see James and Joel. Like, it sucks, man. I understand it, especially when it's a last minute decision. But like, I'm from a fan of me that wants to see an NBA title. I'm like, man, if he's got to sit 7 more games, let his big ass sit. Like, get me to the playoffs.
I think the only thing I could do on the load management side is if you're going to do that, you should maybe, I don't want to use the word respect, but take care of your fan base and use those load management on road games.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't care if that Boston family just wanted to see Joel Embiid and James Harden. I don't give a crap about those Boston. I care about, mom and pop with their little kid, in South Philly that, did it. Plus, on the flip side of it, when they use the load management on the road, don't even let them travel with the team. Somebody like Joel Embiid, just one less trip on an airplane I don't know about you guys. I'm a big guy. And I'm not Joel Embiid big, but if I don't have to get on a plane, I'm sore after a 2-hour plane ride.
The pushback that people give the road versus home rest, Phil, is that they play 41 games at home and they're hardly on the road. So like let those teams that only see them twice a year. I don't give a shit. I'm sorry.
If that game last night was in Memphis, I don't care about one Memphis Grizzlies fan. I don't want Joel Embiid playing in that game last night.
No,
what about little Jimmy?
Little Jimmy?
No, but to get back to your point about Tobias Harris, because I do want to highlight him because I thought he played really good last night, and it's a great sign for the Sixers because I think with Tobias Harris, it's clearly all mental with him, right? Like everything, you can tell when he's in a really good groove, when he's in a really good spot mentally, and he always talks about positive vibrations and positive vibes, right? But he's somebody that does have to keep his confidence, and I think that's where we see him lack from time to time, but not last night. And I think that's a huge thing. There's a part in the game where on that huge shot that Harden hit at the end of the game in that corner where he's trapped, he bailed Tobias out. That was just a really dumb play by Tobias Harris because he didn't take the open shot that was there whenever Harden passed it to him, and then they basically just switched spots for that shot for Harden. But then he comes back and hits 2 big threes to close the game. Probably 2 of the biggest shots in the game to win that game, right? To get back in the lead. And so that kind of showed me the waves of confidence that he was going through in that game, but he was actually able to pull through that in the fourth quarter, in the big moments against a quality opponent. I think something that Dylan said is worth highlighting as well. We've seen him disappear against the Bucks, and sometimes it feels like, at least from my perspective, it feels like it's because he's guarding somebody that it's going to take all of his energy and he's going to have to exhaust himself in the defensive end to the point where he's like, I'll just let those guys cook on offense. They're the better scorers anyways. But like, still, it's not an excuse to not show up because there's moments in those games where he has open shots and he'll just come up short, right? Like an air ball, right? So whenever he airballs like an open 3, in my mind, I'm like, your mind's just not where it needs to be. You're not shooting that with confidence, right? And so that's where I come back to with Tobias Harris every time. I mean, Phil especially, you know I'm a big Tobias guy. I know you are as well. He's a guy that when he's rolling on all cylinders, he's one of the most perfect pieces to have with this team. Like when he's hitting the 3 ball, he's a perfect piece. He's a 3-and-D guy. There was times where he was guarding Ja Morant last night. Now, mind you, not able to stay in front of him.
Yeah.
Why not? I wonder why. But Like you're forcing him into Joel Embiid, so they're playing a defensive concept there with John Moran. I thought it worked beautifully.
I don't think Tobias Harris gets credit for his defense. I don't think he gets credit for his defense.
No, it's so improved from
that credit.
Tobias Harris from when he got here back in the Jimmy Butler year.
Oh yeah,
and to where he is defensively now, that just goes to show how much work and effort he has put in to become better and how to stay in front of guys and stuff like that. But also, Tobias, and I know, Scotty, just like you said, me and you, we're the big Tobias, fan club right here. We're the captains of that.
Very small in Philly.
Very small group of us, but we are the captains of that fan club. But the thing is, when he's confident, it translates to his game. It also translates to his leadership. I think he is silently one of the bigger leaders on this team, in the locker room, on that bench. And when he's struggling, it shows a little bit. But when he's confident on the court, it helps on the court, obviously, but it also helps the leadership aspect of it because you see more of it coming out in him. And I think that is just as important.
See, Scotty, you bring up the mental thing, how it's all mental with Tobias, and I do think you're right, but it's like, as a Philly fan, like, why do we have so much of this in this city throughout all the teams in this city? Every year we're discussing multiple guys that have that have like this, I don't know, like they just like Alec Boehm at the plate or in the field. Oh, it's all mental. Tobias Harris, Joel Embiid. Oh, it's all mental. Carson Wentz. Oh, Markelle Fultz, Ben Simmons. It's all mental. Jesus, can we just get a solid, consistent piece in this city?
I feel you.
We do. We have Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, I was going to say.
There's nobody more consistent than that.
That is our guy.
I got to bring up Joe's comment here, and I know Joe's put a couple comments like this on the screen so far. Yeah, I just want to buy in. History repeats itself, and we always come up small. Joe, I just want you to know we all feel that. It is a book that we've read before, but I think maybe this year it's a little different, guys.
I think it is. I said that before. Scotty mentioned it earlier on the show, and just put aside how it looks different because we're not going to know until the second round of the playoffs if it's different. But, and I'm not saying Joe does this because I don't know. I don't think is he on Twitter. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But he is. But like I've never seen him do it. But other people, I've mentioned this to Scotty all the time. These Sixers fans that they're the same people that say, "Well, I need to see it in the playoffs," and when they win 27 of 34. There's not a peep. Or when they win 10 straight, there's not a peep. Mm-hmm. But when they lose to Boston, there's 18 tweets about how Doc Rivers needs to be fired. Stop. Like if the positives aren't going to matter, if the wins don't matter, don't talk about the losses because apparently nothing matters until the postseason, right? So if you're one of those people, I need you to just zip it. Just if you want to wait till the postseason, wait till the postseason.
Right. But what I was more getting at is I feel Joe's frustration. I do. And I'm trying, and I don't know about you guys, I'm trying to use some of that positive energy I've built with the Phillies run, with the Eagles run, and translate and like, all right, you know what? Positive things can happen in Philadelphia. I'm hoping it does with this Sixers team. I get Joe's frustrations, but maybe things are just a little different in Philly this year. The water just tastes a little different this year.
Is it frustration because of the team, or is it frustration because just as as an impatient person, we have to wait for 2 more months? You know what I mean? Like, is that the frustration? Like, you just don't want to wait anymore?
Right. I mean, that could be part of it there as well.
I mean, for me, like the history repeats. I get it. Like I do. And at the end of the day, the only thing that could change that narrative, is either it doesn't repeat itself because history repeats itself until it doesn't, or you move on from Embiid and that core, right? That's what you're saying basically is with this core, they're not going to win it past the second round. I get that, but every season is different. And like I just said, history repeats itself until it literally doesn't, right? Doc Rivers, he struggled in Orlando, wasn't able to complete his destiny of winning a championship. He went to Boston and won a championship. So it's not that, Doc Rivers can never win a championship as a head coach. He definitely has, and maybe his time has passed. We don't know. But that's kind of my point. History repeats itself until it doesn't, until Joel Embiid does break through, right? Everybody has their breakthrough moment. Maybe Joel Embiid's just came really late. Maybe Harden's came really late. You have to have that in your head. And I guess my biggest thing, I get that perspective of not wanting to buy in, not wanting to be heartbroken. It's like going back.
That's what it is. They don't want to be heartbroken again.
Exactly. It's like going back in with a girl that cheated on you. And why would you get back with her after she cheated on you? She's only going to do it again, right? So like that's like the mindset here with the fan base. And I get that. But at the same time, you got to understand that any given season, every season's different. All it takes is for that Kawhi shot to not fall, for it to roll off the rim, and the narrative about the team completely changes, right? So, like, these are the little things. It's not just that the Sixers always come up small in these moments. There's things that do happen. Embiid got his face broken last year. Like, that happened. Like, it sucks. And I hate it, right? You hate to see him beat up every time we're in the playoffs. But that happened. He got elbowed in the face. It wasn't his fault. And he had a broken eye. Like, it sucks. But I just look at it from that perspective. We got to have a little bit of faith in this team. They are a team that gets themselves in the top 3, top 4 seeds in the conference for the last, 4 to 5 years.
Yeah.
So they're consistently doing that. They're putting themselves in position. It's just now about capitalizing in the playoffs. And to be transparent, I picked the Bucks to win the championship at the beginning of the year. Like, I'm a Sixers fan. I do a lot of Sixers content. I love the Sixers. I want the Sixers to win. And I think they have a chance. But I picked the Bucks. I mean, I'm being realistic at the same time as still giving the Sixers a chance at the championship. And I think that's all we have to do as a fan base. Don't have to buy in and say they're going to be the champions. We don't know that. They're not the Eagles that went undefeated for most of the season, right? But we do know that they have a chance. Like, you're not being realistic if you say they don't have a chance.
We've used the word different a couple times this year. Like, why are they different? Are they different? And the reason I say is, sure, they're still the 3 seed in the East, and they can't leap Milwaukee yet. They're probably not going to leap Boston. So, is it really different? Bro, they have the 4th best record in the league, in the entire league. So if the Sixers are the 4th, if I told you before the season started, the Sixers were the 3rd or 4th best team in the association, that tells you one thing. They have a very good chance to make a title-esque run. And you look out West, beat Memphis last night. Not easy, but beat them. Handled Denver, the 1 seed, a couple weeks ago. Beat the Lakers, beat the Clippers. Like, they have success with these great teams out West. They've beaten Milwaukee this year. They have one true roadblock. Boston. And guess what? We get them at home on primetime television this Saturday. For all you.
That's a great segue there, Dylan. Great job there, man. What I was going to say as the segue to the final segment of this show today was we know it. We've said it on this show and for a week or two now. This final stretch, it's going to be a murderer's row stretch of games here. We're not going to win them all. But can we parlay last night's performance into maybe a few more wins than we thought we were going to get? Can we parlay last night's performance into, even if they lose, say, Saturday night, just hypothetically speaking, they lose Saturday night to Boston, but in a tight competitive game, can we as fans parlay last night's game into keeping the positivity even when the going gets tough in the next 2-3 weeks? Because, again, like you said, Dylan, we got Boston on Saturday night. Then we got 2 Miami games, Dallas, Milwaukee, Indy. It's a tough stretch the next 6-7 games.
Yeah.
So we need to use last night's parlay as fans, and they do as a team, to continue the success, but continue the positive feeling that this team is legit no matter what happens on one given night.
I'm glad you bring up the fans, because I want to put a test out to all of South Philadelphia. I won't be there, so it's kind of contradictory, but show up.
Yeah.
Like, I know we're still recovering from the Eagles Super Bowl and the Phillies. Like, I get it. We've been through it the last couple months. Saturday night, 8:30, you got all. Go be one of those Eagles. Go drink all day and show up at the Wells Fargo Center.
If you're not going, Dylan, you should set up a table out in the parking lot. You don't even have to go to the game. Just go set up a table in the parking lot, drink, fire that crowd up, do pregame live from the parking lot.
Great
That's
point.
what you should be doing.
The only thing I will say is it's going to be 23 degrees tomorrow.
Yeah. Wasn't it 70 yesterday? I was outside grilling on my deck last night, and I'm going to have a knit hat on tomorrow.
But I need that arena to even to take it up another level from last night. And last night, some of the players said it was one of the loudest buildings they've been in a very long time. Take it up another notch.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
Scott, parlaying last night.
Yeah. What I was going to say, this game against the Celtics on Saturday, mind you, if they lose, it is what it is. The Celtics are the best team in the NBA, but at the same time, there's going to be incentive or motivation for every single game that they play the rest of this season, because I look at this game against the Celtics as their third matchup. It's the first time they play in Philly. They lost both matchups in Boston already. So this is your chance. You have to win this game, and then you have to win the one in April in order to ultimately split with this team. And I think if you have any hopes of getting that 1 seed, it lies right there on Saturday. It's right in front of you. That's where you can close the gap by getting a W. And then obviously they take the loss, and you get a one step closer. But as far as just kind of catapulting them into this schedule, I mean, you look at the next game, there's motivation there. The next 2 games with the Miami Heat, that's the team that knocked you out of the playoffs last year. That's PJ Tucker's old team. We haven't played them yet this season. They haven't looked great this season, but it's still the Miami Heat, right? So that's going to be another big game. And then, of course, you have the Mavericks after that with the Kyrie edition, and then the Milwaukee Bucks ultimately, which you've split with so far this season. And we've actually played both home games against Milwaukee so far. So we got 2 games in Milwaukee. So you gotta ultimately split these series in order to jump these teams. And I think that's what makes these games against Boston and Milwaukee specifically very, very big. And you got to get that monkey off your shoulder, right? I know it's just regular season, but you don't want to go into the playoffs having lost to Boston 4 times. Like that's just not a good look. That's not a good look for your confidence if you're to play Boston. So they need to kind of even this out by heading back to Philly and taking care of their home court. But I definitely think they can, guys. Like we've been talking about this whole show, they look a little bit different. They look a little bit more motivated than they have in past. They look a little bit more mentally tough. And I think that bodes well for them down the stretch. It once again just comes down to ultimately balancing out going after all these wins against big teams, but also making sure you have your guys ready in the playoffs and that they're healthy. That's the biggest thing. You don't want to run PJ Tucker into the ground right now, right? Now's the time to kind of let off of PJ Tucker, in my opinion, and let him rest a little bit more than what he would usually. But we are going against a ton of contenders right now, so you want to show your best punch at the same time. We got to balance that out, and I think that's going to be the key during this last stretch.
I think I'm going full force until like the final 10 games. Right. There's 24 games left. I'm going all in until the final 10. If you come out on top, great. If you're around 500, great. And then let Joel and James and PJ start to get ready. But I do think they want to see kind of where they line up. And I would like Phil, pose this question out. If you ever want to run a poll, like starting Monday, if they beat Boston, I want to ask the fan base, does that change your mind at all? The run they've been on pre-All-Star break, they come out and beat Memphis and Boston. Does it change your viewpoint at all?
Well, I guess I got a poll to run if they win on Saturday night.
That's if they win. That's if they win.
Scotty was just talking about, and with the seeding and the conference and stuff like that. Yesterday I had Sean Bernard on. I said it, and if anybody wants to go back, it's on the YouTube page at DSM Media. It was a great interview, and I appreciate Sean's time. But he brought up that he doesn't care where the Sixers finish in the conference. He doesn't care if they get the 1 seed or the 2 seed, because I brought that up yesterday because I'm like, I want to avoid Boston or Milwaukee. I don't want to have to face both to get to the NBA Finals. Right. And he said it didn't matter. But then when the way Scotty's talking there, it kind of made me think again that Sean tried to sway me to not caring, because we focused too much in years past of worrying to get that number 1 seed, worrying about this or that. And instead of just getting healthy and getting right for the playoffs, but now listening and thinking about last night's game and these matchups in the next couple games, I'm back to thinking that I do want to make sure that we show we're the best team in the conference. We raise up those rankings, get to 1 or 2, try our best to avoid having to play both those teams in back-to-back rounds in the playoffs.
So I agree, kind of. I don't think seeding matters as much as we tried to make it out to be a couple years ago. But I will say, to your point, Phil, the year we got the 1 seed still fell short. In years past, the East, the top of the East, has never been this tough and this good. Right. So that gauntlet of having to get through those 2 teams consecutively to get to the finals, and then who the hell knows what you're walking into, that would be one of the toughest roads probably ever. Whoever gets out of the East,
compare that to everybody saying that the Eagles had an easy road to the Super Bowl.
Right.
That would be the complete and total opposite. And I'm not saying I want to coast to the finals.
Yeah.
But if you could try to find a way to not have to face those two teams or get those two teams to knock one or the other out, I mean, that would be pretty ideal, wouldn't it?
If I could get the Cavs in the second round rather than the Milwaukee Bucks, then I would definitely rather do that, quite honestly. But
I think the only way to is to get the 1 seed. Though.
I think honestly the biggest thing for me, it's not necessarily the seeding once again. Like, it's more or less just being able to know in your mind, as the 76ers, as Joel Embiid, James Harden, and this core that we have here, Doc Rivers, if you go into a series with the Boston Celtics in the playoffs, you know you can beat them. That's what I need before I get to the playoff. That's bigger to me than any seeding or anything like that. If we beat the Celtics on Saturday, I'm not most hype about that because, we got a better chance at the 1 seed. I'm most hype about that because I know our confidence has been lifted. We've been able to beat the best team in the NBA. So that's where it comes from for me. I would agree with Sean in a sense of you're not going to sell out for the seeding, right? Like we don't need to sell out on this last part of the season to get that 1 seed. But you do want to ultimately go into the playoffs with a good rhythm, a good chemistry, and a good amount of confidence. And I think that's what feeds into it.
I think that's fair enough. I think that's a fair way to put it. I like that part about it. It just gives you the confidence winning these games that if you do have to face.
Same for us too, right?
Yeah. I think that's a very fair way to put it. All right, we're going to wrap up Trey in the AM right there for the night or for the morning, whatever time. I don't even know what it is right now. I got to go to work here in like 30 minutes. I don't even know what I'm doing here.
Man.
I want to thank Dylan and Scotty for joining me here. It's been a while since I've had both of you guys on the show with me this morning, so I appreciate your time,
and
guys.
Full hour of Sixers.
Yeah, a full hour. We didn't even. I haven't talked Eagles on this show since Monday. I don't know
how you could, man. I'm depressed, and whenever you talk about Eagles, I'm just
so much Eagles on my mind. I was telling Dylan before we went live that I'm putting together a should they stay or should they go series on all the free agents. I'm ready. I'm moved on. I've passed on. I've got baseball on my mind. I've got next year on my mind, and I got the Sixers on my mind. No Flyers on my mind.
Got March Madness on my mind.
And somebody, I don't even know what's going on with March Madness. I was texting somebody to get them on the show to talk ahead of time, like pre set up an interview for this show so that Monday before March Madness starts, so I have somebody pre-scheduled. I'm like, I don't even know what day that March Madness starts.
So the full 2 days, like the Thursday, Friday is the 16th, 17th. So the 14th is that Tuesday night where there's like the first 2 games, and then Wednesday there's.
I have no clue. I'm like, can you come on Monday before March Madness?
You couldn't just Google. You couldn't Google what the dates were.
I'm like, whatever date it is, sure. I've watched 0 college basketball. But see, the thing is, I don't know about you guys. And I know we're going to wrap this show up. I don't know about you guys, but the Eagles run distracted me from so many other sports. Like somebody told me the other day, the Flyers are a 500 team, and they're not playing great, but they're playing better. You know, college basketball, supposedly there's a great season. There's some great teams, and there's going to be some great matches. I don't know. Like the Eagles season and even the Phillies end to their season distracted me so much from every other sport that I got nothing. I don't know. Like my mind was so focused on them.
No, me too. But I will say, like, ever since the Eagles lost, and you had the 2 weeks between when there was nothing really on except for the Sixers, like every night that the Sixers aren't on, that's all I'm watching. So hopefully I get you guys some winners come March.
Yeah, we'll see. All right, everybody, we're wrapping it up right there. Trending the AM on DSM Media. Make sure you like and subscribe. If you watching this on replay, I check all the comments. I go back and I'll answer them all. So make sure you do that. I'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you to Scotty. Thank you to Dylan. I am Phil Stiefel. We'll be back Monday. Who knows what we're talking about? Hopefully we are recapping a big Sixers-Celtics win. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, and look out for that Should They Stay or Should They Go series. That'll be dropping next week from me on the DSM Media YouTube page. Hey, everybody, have a great weekend. And, it's go Birds still.
Thank God it's Friday.
And Philadelphia has it.